This is my best isometric games tier list, ranked purely based on my personal experience. Each game is placed from masterpiece down to trash, reflecting how they felt to play overall. Let's dive right in. Underrail is one of those games where I sit down for 2 hours and suddenly the whole day is gone. It's a tough, old-school isometric RPG where every fight feels earned and every mistake really hurts. I spend a lot of time planning encounters, laying traps, sneaking through tunnels, and figuring out the smartest way to survive instead of just rushing in. The character building is deep, combat is slow and tactical, and exploration actually matters because the world doesn't hold your hand at all. It can be frustrating, it can be brutal, and it's definitely not for everyone, but when everything clicks, it's incredibly satisfying. That's why, for me, Underrail easily lands in the excellent tier. Baldur's Gate 3 keeps surprising me because it gives me freedom without breaking its own rules. I'm always finding new ways to handle fights, solve problems, or completely change how a situation plays out, and the game actually supports those choices. Combat feels thoughtful and flexible, not just about damage numbers, and the world reacts in ways that feel consistent and earned. The companions stand out because they grow with the story instead of feeling static, and even small side quests carry real weight. It sets a new benchmark for how deep and responsive an isometric RPG can be, which is why I place it in the masterpiece tier. Tyranny feels different from most RPGs right from the start because I'm not trying to save the world. I'm enforcing the rules of a world that's already been conquered. The choices I make aren't about good or evil in a simple way. They're about control, compromise, and living with the results. I really like how early decisions change how areas, factions, and people treat me later on, sometimes in uncomfortable ways. Combat is solid and readable, and the smaller party size keeps everything focused instead of messy. It doesn't always hit as hard near the end, but its ideas and replay value still stand out. That balance of strong themes and focused design is why I place Tyranny in the great tier. Icewind Dale feels like a long, slow journey where patience really matters. I'm building a full party from the start, planning roles carefully, and committing to quests that can take hours instead of minutes. Combat is tough and methodical, with lots of pausing, resting, and thinking ahead, and mistakes are punished quickly if I rush things. The visuals are clearly dated, but they do their job, and for me, they add to the old-school charm rather than hurting the experience. It doesn't try to surprise me with big choices or story twists, but it delivers a focused, combat-heavy adventure that knows exactly what it is. That steady, classic design is why Icewind Dale sits in the great tier. Commandos Origins is all about patience and careful planning, and most of my time is spent watching enemy patterns and waiting for the right moment to move. I like how each commando has a clear role, and pulling off a clean, silent plan using timed actions feels very rewarding when it works. The levels are large and detailed, and the new command system makes complex setups easier to manage than in the older games. That said, bugs and awkward camera moments sometimes break the flow, and a few restarts feel unavoidable. It's strong at its core but held back by rough edges, which is why I place Commandos Origins in the good tier. Divinity Original Sin 2 constantly rewards me for experimenting instead of playing it safe. I'm mixing skills, abusing the environment, and finding solutions that feel clever rather than scripted, whether that's through combat, dialogue, or pure chaos. Turn-based fights are deep and tactical, and the way elements interact makes every encounter feel like a puzzle I can solve in multiple ways. The world feels alive because choices actually close doors, open new paths, and sometimes remove content entirely. Add in strong companions, flexible character builds, and a story that balances seriousness with weird moments, and it all comes together naturally. That level of freedom and confidence is why Divinity Original Sin 2 earns the masterpiece tier. Rue Valley sounds interesting on paper, but actually playing it feels flat and repetitive in the worst way. I'm stuck in a time loop that's meant to reflect depression, yet almost nothing I do meaningfully changes anything. Conversations go on forever without real impact. Choices feel fake, and the mechanics mostly exist to waste time between loops. Even when the game hints at something deeper, it rarely follows through, so exploration turns into walking, waiting, and repeating the same routines. A few moments land emotionally, but they're drowned out by boredom and shallow design. I put Rue Valley in the trash tier because it takes a strong idea and fails to turn it into a meaningful or engaging experience. Diablo II Resurrected reminds me why this genre took over in the first place. The core loop is still simple and addictive. kill monsters, chase loot, and slowly build a character that feels powerful through smart choices, not flashy systems. The updated visuals respect the original mood, and switching between old and new graphics really shows how carefully it's been handled. Some systems are clearly old school and demanding, and the grind can feel heavy by modern standards, but the design still holds together incredibly well. It earns the masterpiece tier because it preserves a genre-defining experience that still works decades later. Atom RPG feels like stepping into an old Fallout-style world with a different coat of paint and a much harsher edge. I like the setting and the way dialogue skills can open or close paths, because talking your way through problems can matter just as much as fighting. Exploration has that classic wasteland tension where you never know if a trip will end in loot or disaster. At the same time, combat can be brutally unbalanced, the inventory system is clunky, and some mechanics feel harder than they need to be for the wrong reasons. It's rough around the edges, but the ideas and atmosphere carry it through. That mix of strong inspiration and clear flaws is why Atom RPG lands in the great tier. Planescape Torment feels less like playing a game, and more like stepping inside a strange, philosophical novel where combat clearly isn't the main point. I spend most of my time talking, reading, and making choices that shape who the Nameless One really is, rather than worrying about builds or loot. The world is weird, dark, and deeply memorable, and the writing carries almost everything, from companions to side characters to the central mystery of identity and regret. It's slow, very text-heavy, and definitely not for players who want constant action, but it commits fully to what it's trying to do. That focus on story, ideas, and atmosphere is why Planescape Torment belongs in the masterpiece tier. Solasta Crown of the Magister feels like a game that really understands tabletop rules and focuses on turning them into clean, readable combat. I enjoy building a full party from scratch, learning how spells, positioning, and vertical levels affect fights, and slowly getting better through smart decisions instead of flashy tricks. The combat system is clear and satisfying, especially if you already know D&D, and the difficulty options make it welcoming without feeling shallow. Where it struggles is in storytelling and presentation, with stiff dialogue and limited class options unless you buy extra content. It does one thing very well, but doesn't try to do everything. That's why Solasta, Crown of the Magister, fits best in the good tier. Desperados III makes me slow down and think through every single move because rushing almost always ends in failure. I'm carefully watching sightlines, timing patrols, and combining each character's tools to clear areas without being seen. What I really like is how many valid solutions each mission allows, whether that's distraction, traps, or perfectly timed group takedowns. The pause and plan system turns chaos into controlled execution, and pulling off a clean sequence feels incredibly rewarding. It can be demanding and heavy on trial and error, but it never feels unfair. That depth and consistency are why Desperados III earns a spot in the excellent tier. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is one of those games that completely takes over my time once I start playing. I'm managing a party, making tough story choices, and fighting long tactical battles that really reward planning, especially with the turn-based mode. The companions feel strong enough that I actually care about their opinions, sometimes even clashing with my own decisions. The mythic paths add another layer, making my character feel genuinely powerful and different each run. It's huge, complex, and sometimes overwhelming, but it fully commits to its ambition. That scale and depth are why Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous earns the masterpiece tier. The Temple of Elemental Evil is a game I respect more than I actually enjoy playing. The turn-based combat is deep and very close to real tabletop D&D, and when fights work, they feel tactical and satisfying. I like the character creation freedom and the way spells and positioning really matter, but the experience is dragged down by bugs, awkward systems, and a heavy focus on dungeon combat with very little story payoff. It often feels unfinished and rough even when the ideas are strong. Because it has solid foundations but too many frustrations, the Temple of Elemental Evil sits in the mediocre tier, meaning it's interesting for D&D fans but hard to fully recommend.